Good evening, everyone. This evening we have a Human Resources and Human Rights Committee. I'm filling in for Councilmember Robinson, who is away for work. We're also joined by committee members Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Keegan, and we are joined by Councilmembers Conti and Kimbrough. We're also joined by our staff, Brian Jimenez. We will have more city staff come up, and we will talk with them when they discuss legislation. This evening, we'll be discussing Ordinance 266123 and Local Law B of 2025. We'll actually be taking them out of order and begin with Local Law B of 2025. Councilmember Conti, would you like to say a few words?
Great, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kimbrough. So, Local Law B, it's an amendment to the city charter. It would include enact a new article entitled Civic Inclusion and Rights Protection. And basically it's meant to affirm or reaffirm that the city of Albany is a welcoming community, regardless of, I list the different classes that are protected under our civil rights and federal, state, and local human rights laws, regardless of race, ethnicity, national origin, immigration status, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, disability, socioeconomic status, or any other protected characteristic recognized under local, state, or federal law. And everyone will be treated with dignity and respect. And then it goes further on to provide clarification in terms of no local law or ordinance will be enacted which contradicts that, or contradicts any of the protections afforded under federal, state, or local laws. It creates an affirmative duty upon all departments, agencies, and officers of the City of Albany to actively uphold and promote the principles of inclusivity and equal protection, including ensuring access to city services, public spaces, and civic participation without discrimination or bias. And it also provides that the Corporation Council any legislation or policy is subject to review for compliance by the Corporation Council, and that assures that it's in compliance with the new article. The intent here is, it's kind of a response to what the atmosphere being created on the federal level in terms of certain, populations basically being, almost attacked, erased, and under attack, basically, especially with LGBT community and the trans community in particular, also with the immigrant community. So the feeling was, my feeling was, our city code includes a range of civil rights protections that are throughout the code. But what I wanted to do was to thread all that, bring that together in a clear affirmative statement in the charter, almost like the charter is our constitution, it's our governing document. It's almost like it's a preamble that sets forth the values of the city within the charter. And that was the intent, to try to bring that together in one place, that basically it's scattered all over the code now, but in one place, that affirmative statement of values, and put that in the city charter, which again is our primary governing document. It's almost like a preamble. It's Article 9, which is the last article, because ideally it would be the first, but there is no way that you can make it the first without renumbering, and then renumbering creates a whole other set of problems when you renumber statutes. So that's what it does. That was the intent. That's where it came from, and that's what it's trying to do.
Excellent. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Councilmember Keegan?
I just have one quick question. Given that this is adjusting the charter, when we read through the bill, it says it shall take effect upon final passage. This is not something that has to go for referendum?
It's not subject to referendum. And it's gone through both law review, law corporation counsel and also our own counsel, and it's not subject to that. Since it does not, the only thing would be subject to referendum, or if it impeded or, impacted the powers or duties of an elected official, and this doesn't.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none?
No.
Councilmember Keegan?
I make a motion to move local law B of 2025 out of committee with a positive recommendation.
All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so
And
much.
I just have a neighborhood meeting tonight, so I apologize if I have to leave. But, oh, and I'll see you later, too. Yes, same meeting.
Next, we have ordinance 266123 by Councilmember Kimbrough. And if we could have Andrea Richard just come on up. And would you like to come up too? Because I bet,
Deborah, you want to come up?
and feel free to sit there or one of the desks, wherever makes you feel good.
Wherever there's a microphone, really. Wow.
Councilmember Kimbrough, did you want to start?
Yeah. So, okay, we've been working at this for a while. We had a prior committee meeting for this ordinance. It's ordinance 266123. The idea was to expand and modernize the City of Albany's minority and women-owned business enterprise program under Chapter 48 of the City Code. This ordinance broadens eligibility, streamlines certification, and strengthens compliance. To ensure equitable participation in all city procurement contracts. Just a couple of provisions, just expanding MWBE eligibility to include professional and human services in addition to the construction-related contracts. This will introduce rapid recertification, recognizing existing certifications from New York State, Albany County, and national MWBE programs. It's going to set citywide goals of 30% for MBE and 30% for WBE participation in all procurement contracts and labor utilization. Again, that's parallel 30s, not accumulative. It's not 60, it's 30 and 30, running parallel. It requires notarized MWBE utilization plans from contractors within 10 days of award notice with monthly progress reporting. It establishes strong enforcement tools, including payment withholding, contract termination, and debarment for non-compliance. And lastly, mandates annual and quarterly reporting to the council on MWBE participation levels and compliance outcomes. And under the impact there is, we're approximating it at $250,000 at this point. And it's primarily to fund compliance oversight, staffing, outreach, and auditing functions. And let's see, what else I got here? Yeah, I may as well read it. I got it here. The ordinance corrects historic gaps by including professional and human services where many MWBEs operate. Rapid recertification aligns Albany's process with New York State, eliminating the redundant bureaucracy and barriers to participation. Expanding eligibility encourages fair competition, local economic growth, and job creation among minority and women entrepreneurs. The quarterly reports ensure ongoing transparency and accountability in tracking the goals. And the ordinance positions Albany as a regional leader in equitable contracting and inclusive economic development. And I'll stop there.
Excellent. And I should also note, we are also joined by our clerk, Shaniqua Jackson, who was working hard in the back and I missed introducing. What would be wonderful is if both of our guests could introduce themselves and just give their background. Andrea, I don't ever remember your title, and I know that MWBE Maven is not an official title, so
Yeah.
Oh.
That's good.
No. My title is Chief Compliance Officer, but the main thing I do is administer the MWBE program, and I've been doing that for 7 years. So I just want to preface to say I'm very invested in the well-being of this program, but I won't make my comments yet. Go ahead.
Deborah, if you could introduce yourself too.
My name is Deborah Williams. I am an activist. I've been working, doing this work for over 30 years now. I am the co-founder of Elevate Every Business, Inc. We are economic development and business development focusing primarily on MWBE's people with disabling conditions, veterans, those people that tend to fall through the cracks. But I also have my own for-profit company. I've been in MWBE for years with different companies that I've owned and have worked as an MWBE on contracts, but I've been in MWBE with the state of New York. I'm based in Albany. I've lived in Albany for 39 and a half years now, but have helped to get many organizations, many companies certified, mostly in New York State, but in other states, in localities. I've worked with minority contractor organizations, but really have been working to help MWs, minority women business organizations, who have a particularly hard time because most of the laws and ordinances and programs are developed from a building trades perspective. And what happens is it leaves women falling through the cracks in their businesses. While they are represented in the building trades, and I've worked with those organizations a lot, many of their companies, they're more represented in professional services and in commodities. And that's where we don't see, both in laws and in practice and procedures, we don't see those businesses represented as well. And so when looking at how we can best have that happen here, which will not only service the needs of those businesses, but of the communities. Women of color, I was just reading part of a report today to put into a paper that I'm writing. We look at how women are the gatekeepers for not only their families, but the communities. So if we're looking at building communities, economically, particularly distressed communities, we are looking at bringing up the economic wellness of women and for what they do not only in their families, in their communities, but what they provide in other communities that are outside the distressed communities. And so if we don't solve this problem right here in the city of Albany, I can say as somebody who's been running a program and that we've partnered with Albany Law School for, we started the program just after the pandemic because we were supposed to start it and then the pandemic happened, so we waited. And working with women right here and starting businesses and growing businesses with most of those women living with a chronic illness or a disability, many of them being single head of household, probably about almost half of the women in the program being women over the age of 40, and a number of them living in public housing, some of them raising children or grandchildren, many of them being caretakers, and the issues that they have, all of them have done business. They haven't necessarily had a legal business, and even of those that have the challenges that they face. And so looking at the benefit that it will be, and we look at that and have them look at the benefit for them, their households, and the community if they were to have a leg up, which we help to give them in partnership with, with Albany Law School, how it would benefit if these kinds of laws, and they weren't trying to compete with bigger companies throughout the world, and even just in how this is processed, how this is, how they can participate in the procurement process. It would help not only them, but the community at large. And so that's really that's been my emphasis since I did this with the first administration I did this with, which was the Whalen administration. So I'm so happy that this time it's going to happen. I don't want to be with one more administration trying to do any of this. I want to have different conversations about what has happened and how we can improve it.
And we have another guest joining us, so if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, for the record, will you?
Good evening. Todd Arena. I'm a senior staff attorney at Albany Law School's Community Economic Development Clinic. I'm the main liaison at the Albany Law School EPS Justice Center, working with Ms. Deborah Williams and the Mady Mod program that she was referring to. And I'm here in that capacity, as well as my own capacity as necessary if you get into things that I can't do in my official capacity.
Thank you so much. Andrea, if you don't mind, I would love to have any feedback that you have on the legislation.
Thank you. I just have a question, actually. I would like to understand what is the rationale behind establishing a goal for the city of Albany that is twice that of the state of New York.
Which goal is that?
So the state of New York's goal is 15 and 15, so combined that's 30, but this legislation has 30 and 30, so combined that's 60.
Right, but again, the goals are, it's really just increasing it from 15 to 30. I know it's lofty, but we, again, no one gets taken out and shot if we don't meet the goal.
But why, how is it, if it's 30 and 30, if it's a minority 30% goal and a women 30% goal, then I don't understand how that's not 60. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding the legislation.
Again, they're parallel goals. You're combining the numbers. There's a goal for the MBE and a goal for the WBE. I know you're saying there's an overlap in the population, and I understand that.
No, I'm saying that, so there's a value for the contract, and if you were to meet both goals, then 60% would be subcontracted out to women or minorities. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, I'm not.
If it's 30 and 30%?
Oh, that's not the way I see it.
The state of New York has the same structure that we have, but for them it's 15% and 15%, so the combined goal is 30%. And, and it's based on demographic information, and there was recently a disparity study published in 2024, and actually the utilization that the state of New York assigned to this area based on demographic information was actually less than 30. It was like 26.9 or something like that. But 30 I think makes sense as a goal, and of course I support that. There's another issue with the percentage, which is that in our what do you call that? The general conditions in our contract, in our city contracts, it states that the prime contractor needs to perform at least 50% of the work themselves. So they actually cannot subcontract out 30% to women-owned businesses and 30% to minority-owned businesses and still be self-performing 50% of the work. So those are some of my concerns with the percentage.
I just want to support the fact that these seem to be parallel goals. So 30% of, say, a $100,000 contract could be for MBE, and then another 30% of that, say, a $100,000 contract would be just 30%. And it doesn't seem like there's anything that requires an overlap.
I don't know what you mean by overlap.
It would only be 60% if we were overlapping, if somehow, or
60% would be if there's no overlap, which I believe is actually in the legislation. It says that if a business is owned by a minority woman, then they can only apply that to one or the other. I'm pretty sure that's what it says in the legislation.
Right, and in terms of the percentages, is there parallel, aspirational, there's no requirement that the contractor reaches 60?
Well, I mean, then I'm not really sure what we're saying to the contractors, because it's an odd thing to ask the contractors. I mean, they submit plans and then they submit data to me throughout the course of the contract. And I mean, I spend a lot of time, helping them to find MWBEs, and, they would say that I'm basically pressuring them to meet the goal. And so, if it's strange to say to them, well, we have the 60%, but you don't actually have to meet it. That puts me in an odd position. I like having something firm that they're expected to meet as best they can,
But you said they're pressuring you, they say you're pressuring them to meet the goal?
They probably feel that if we had contractors...
But you should be.
Yes.
You should be pressuring them
Of
to
course,
meet the goal.
that's my job.
Could we
But
talk in numbers? So let's say from $100,000, if we're looking at a 30% MBE, we're looking at, what would that end up being? About 33,000 and change. So we would deduct from the 100,000 the 33,000 and change, and they would need to get another 33,000 and change if they're trying to qualify as a WBE. There is no overlap in.
I'm not sure about this word overlap. I mean, what would I be saying?
Could the same contractor qualify under MBE and WBE for the same under the same contract?
Sure.
Okay.
But most companies, some are minority women owned, but really most of them are either a minority owner or a woman owner. And these goals have to do with assigning a percentage of 30% to women-owned businesses and 30% to minority-owned businesses. And then it's specified within the legislation that if a person is a minority woman, then their percentage or their value, their contract value would only be applied to one or the other. So there are, I'm not sure how that's 30%. That's 60%. That's 60% subcontracted out, right? I'm not sure what's meant by parallel, I guess.
Ms. Wood, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, as someone who's worked on contracts, though they were state contracts, as an MWBE, and I've worked in a teaming relationship, and I've worked as a subcontractor. They counted me in both roles. I was an MWBE, and so they got a chip in the M and a chip in the W side. And when you're saying that overlap, that's not the way that's happened. I've had the job of looking at those numbers and putting those numbers down on the paper and finding contracts. I think this points to a much bigger problem, because why do we not in the city of Albany have MWs? Because I can tell you names and phone numbers of people. As a matter of fact, I can tell you names and phone number of people who left here, women of color, with their businesses because they could not get work. And so herein lies what the real problem is. The other thing is, I need to tell you something about that. We've never had a disparity study in the city of Albany, for real, for real. I can tell you about that disparity study. I was an MWBE, and I wasn't included in that. Certified with the state, I got my papers. There were a lot of companies. I wouldn't take what was done in that state disparity study as giving anyone even a sniffle of a snapshot in what was really going on in Albany. The only somewhat, and I use somewhat in capital letters in bold, of disparity studies that have ever been done in the city of Albany is the one that my company did, and don't even look at that. We did that in roughly, I think it was 34, 38, 39 days, but it wasn't even 40. and it was for one project, but we literally looked at businesses, and the way you do that is not the way they did that. I know that company very well, and they do good stuff, but what they did in Albany was not what they did in New York City, nor should have been exactly. But there is no snapshot. There's never been a disparity study, and no one should look at anything that's ever been done to give you a real number. When goals are set, and I had nothing to do with these goals, Common Council voted on them, and I actually support it. They're aspirational, and they should be. That's how they're done, and I have advised on them with different municipalities and different jobs, different companies, and with private vendors. They're aspirational, but they should have a plan with them on how we're going to reach them. It's just like you sit with your child and say, we're going to get all A's this year, and this is how we're going to do it. Do our homework, we're going to study, get a tutor, all those things. You don't just say it and then put them in a dark closet with no study tools. And so this is what you do when you do MWBE. And the job you have is very tough. How do I know? Not because I've had your exact job, but I have been the heavy. And yes, it's like being the bad parents. Sorry, but that's what that is. And the contractors are going to be the ones that think you are, and I've had that position on specific projects. And I was called names, and I got bad phone calls. I'm not saying you do, but I'm saying having been in some of that role. But that's the job, because it is not easy to do. And
Right.
Yeah.
So
But,
if I could just
yeah,
pop in here, because I think I kind of understand the disconnect. One thing I would note is that because, and Andrew, you can correct me if I'm wrong with my understanding of what you're saying, because we have in the legislation two separate places of either the MBE or the WBE, it isn't structured so that there's an overlap in the legislation. So that could have been the intent, but I would agree as I read through, and I will, full disclosure, I was thinking that there would be an overlap, an allowed overlap too, but as I just went through the legislation again, it is two separate structures, and so in that case, you would not be able to have an overlap. So that is something that should likely be changed to say that there is allowed to be an overlap. So that is one piece. And then the other piece is, well, I completely agree, and I think it's important to have aspirational goals. I think that that's how we move forward with things. It is nearly impossible to enforce aspirational goals because they're aspirational, so you can't actually enforce them. And I think Andrea's point is that if it's an aspirational goal, it might actually make things worse because there's not then that stick that goes along with it, because it's not something that they would be able, if it's something that it's aspirational so you can't get there, you're not necessarily working towards it. So it might be something that is worthwhile to consider, because one of the biggest parts of this legislation, aside from the actual percentages, that to me is the most hopeful and important part, is the real expansion of the program to go beyond what we're looking at right now. And so that's something that I would hate to lose that part in the discussion of trying to, and it's also that encompasses a lot of different businesses that should be using this and should be doing this, but maybe are not familiar with this, and it might just bring us into a different space. So it might be worthwhile to look at phasing in a higher, sometimes, when we look at legislation and we have what we'd like to be a higher goal, a lot of times what we do is we phase in raising the goal up, and that way it's something that there is an enforceable piece, but there's also that aspirational goal there to kind of push towards it. So I don't know if that's something that I just offer that, since I work on a lot of legislation with a lot of aspirational goals.
Right, so my question would be, how well are contractors doing with meeting the goals?
so,
And I've seen your reports.
yeah, the annual report. Like last year, the total participation we got was, I think, nearly 21%. And that's combined, M and W. And the previous year, I think it was about 26 or nearly 26%, and that was, that's combined. But our goal right now, that we have in our contracts is only 15%, so it's very low. I mean, I definitely support 100%, increasing it to match the state. Should match the state, and that's 30%, and that's the same as it is in like Buffalo, Syracuse. There's really no city that has a 60% goal, and that's because of the two reasons that I was mentioning. One, the demographic information, which I know I understand you're saying the demographics might be wrong, might be incorrect. I defer to you. You probably know about that, but I did read the disparity study, and that is the purpose of the disparity study, is to help people in our position to determine what their goals should be. And the other reason that I'm concerned about it is because of the general conditions. Like I said, at the city, we want contractors to perform at least 50% of the contracts themselves. And that's right there in the contract. So I'm sorry, Megan.
Councilmember Keegan?
Sorry, I was waiting for Councilmember Farrell to call on me. I think my other question is that we are sort of very rigidly structuring this in such a way as to say there's an equitable goal between MBEs and WBEs instead of an overarching goal of MWBE participation. So there's a certain rigidity to that and lack of flexibility. And again, I just want your thoughts on that rather than to make a specific comment that I would push things in one way or the other. And I don't know, Andrea, if you guys have the breakdown of numbers between MBE and WBE participation, or if, because of our current structure, that's sort of all lumped under one roof.
Yeah, I don't have that because that's not how the current ordinance is written. But if it is divided going forward, then naturally that would be something that I would report on in the annual report. But I mean, again, the disparity study, which I actually have, but it does a breakdown. Oh, here it is. If you look at it, it's like I'm looking right now at the Capital District, and like let's just to look at, say, the construction numbers, because that's what we currently, apply MWBE to. Right, the total MWBE availability in this area, according to the New York State Disparity Study, is 26.06%. But this is very upsetting. That is made up of 23.07% non-minority female. So in other words, of that MWBE percentage that they found in their disparity study, the minority portion of that minority-owned businesses is just 2.99%. Like that's the core problem, that MWBE is trying to address. But I mean, if just increasing, I guess one thing I just want to say is that increasing the goals doesn't cause those businesses to exist. I mean, it encourages them over time, to grow but it's not something where we could suddenly have more than, right, 3% minority-owned businesses to draw from.
Right, but then we're also, with expanding, you don't think we'll get more businesses, different types of business? You don't think it'd grow?
Yes, I do. I mean, I do think that, that's the purpose of these laws, and I do think that they work over time. But right now, our percentage is 15%. So to increase it to 30%, the state's goal, makes perfect sense to me. I think that's absolutely where it should be. But to increase it to 60% is, it's just sort of like out of the ballpark demographically, and so it puts me in an odd position with the contractors, because I guess what I'm trying to say is it makes it sort of, takes away a little bit of credibility from the program if we're saying to them, well, this goal is so much higher than the demographics, can provide, and you don't really have to meet it, but it's aspirational. I just find that to be a problematic thing to enforce.
Right.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you. As I listen to this, I guess my concern is the intent is to get it right. When people call me about MWBEs, they know nothing. It's a lot of businesses that could be participating, and they're not, because it's not calling them. And I think that what I think I'm hearing is, trying to entice people. It's a lot of money that is spent in the city of Albany, and a lot of times we don't even have minority people in place to benefit from it. And so I'm thinking what I'm hearing is this will entice people to go routes. It's people that have aspirations. They have things that could be valuable to the city, but they haven't acted off of it. And I'm hoping, and I would like to hear, because, when I'm listening to this conversation, I keep on thinking about inclusionary housing. I keep on thinking about a lot of things that are going wrong in the city, and every time we try to address them, it seems like, we get pushback in terms of trying to make things a level playing field. So I'm just looking, I'm hoping I can get a response from you that can make me understand why is it so difficult to make this work in the manner that the resolution is speaking to.
I apologize. I don't want you to feel that way at all. I'm coming at this from just the nuts and bolts of administering this program. And I came in here just wanting to understand what is the rationale behind the city of Albany having a goal that's twice as high as the state of New York or any other city in New York, or it would probably be the highest goal in the country, because New York State already has the highest goals. So I'm just saying, I just think that there's a little bit of a misalignment with how this works in the field, but another way we could go is you could raise it to 60%, and then the issues will play out, and I'll report on them in my annual report. Any company that wants to, I feel like this is so in the weeds, but any company that is not an MWBE that wins the prime contract would have to submit a waiver request because they simply couldn't meet the general conditions if they, this law would be in conflict with the general conditions. So my office would become an office that's just processing a lot of waiver requests all the time, which isn't what I think is right for the program. I want people to be able to physically meet the goal without conflicting with the general conditions of the City of Albany contracts. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But so we have the 30% for the MWBEs. I think most of them end up being WBEs. I think,
yeah,
and they're not minority folks. Some are, but they aren't. So I think setting separate goals, and separating the MBE and WBEs, I think, I know I keep saying aspirational, but we're looking to get more minority businesses engaged and involved in this business and support their businesses. I think, personally, I'm still stuck and don't see the problem with having parallel goals, because we're not making the WBE that's meeting the 30%. They don't have to meet it twice. They just, it's 30%. We're trying to get.
Maybe the disconnect is that, so because of New York State procurement law, we have to award the contract to the low bidder, you know, so it doesn't matter if whoever wins the contract is going to be the lowest qualified bidder. And sometimes they might be a minority-owned business, sometimes they might be a woman-owned business, but the majority of the time, they're not either of those. You know, that's sort of the fundamental thing that we're dealing with. And then they are required to subcontract out a certain percentage in order to make sure that, you know, a certain percentage of the city's, you know, the value of the city's contracts goes to women and minority-owned businesses. So if the prime contractor is not an MWBE and they subcontract out and they meet the goals, then they would be subcontracting out 30% to minority-owned businesses and 30% to women-owned businesses, and then they would be self-performing 40%.
But why both? Why would they be contracting out to both?
If that's not the case, then I think the goal is 30%, and it's just written wrongly in here. Is that right?
It's not the case, right? Yeah,
It's just 30%.
It's 30.
It's on green. Can you hear me now? Okay, there we go. Sorry. Under section A, overall goal, it specifies for her that she has to do 30% to MBEs, 30% to WBEs. So that's where she's getting the 60% from. And that's why I asked the question, are we looking at an overall 30% goal? Because she's in agreement with an overall 30% goal.
Yes.
In which case it would make sense. The question becomes, do you then have a specific goal of 15% MBEs, because that's where we're looking to target significant growth? It sounds to me, Andrea, like what we're seeing in the survey data is that there's far less MBE participation than there is WBE participation. So we really want to push that number. So to fix this, you'd be reducing that number to 15 and 15 for the overall goal to be 30, or we set a generalized goal for 30% MWBE, and we're not looking at specific targets between the two. And again, I'm just looking for clarification on what the overall goal was. I'm not saying to go one way or the other, but the way that language is written, she does end up with 60%.
Right, so the goal is to increase, from my end, and this is MBEs. Well, I mean, both MWBs and MBEs, but we are not getting the participation from the MBEs, and that really is something we need to work on and drive up however we can. So with that being said.
So would you agree to an amendment at 15 and 15 to get to 30?
Can I suggest something?
Yeah.
When I've been called to work with, I'll give you an example, because it was my company that recommended the goals, like for the Convention Center Authority. We didn't just pull numbers out of the air. And when I said aspirational, I wasn't saying try to grow 2 feet in a year, you know, or lose 50 pounds in 2 days. I mean, TikTok says that, but I don't. Something realistic. You look at what's there, and you don't just look at the demographics. The other things you look at. I mean, some of the things you do is you actually look at the number of businesses that exist in the area. You don't look at certified businesses. You don't do that, because the truth is, and I'll tell you from looking in the city of Albany then and now, most of the minority and minority women-owned businesses are not certified. And even in just what you were talking about with the businesses here, I bet there are people in this room that said, no, there are more MBE construction companies. in the building trades? Because if we sat here and just wrote on pieces of paper separately and did an exercise of the companies we personally know about in this room, we would get more than what you said right then, if we compare the list. And so we know there are more companies. The problem is they're not certified in the city of Albany. I personally, off the top of my head, know at least a dozen that are certified in the state of New York and not in the city of Albany.
Well, we do accept New York State certification, so they can perform on City of
I
Albany.
know, but they're not
Yeah.
working on your contracts. I know they're not. I know they're not bidding. The other issue is that when I sit with the company I get a contract with to look at what the problem is, we don't solve the problem before we do triage. One of the issues that I think might be going on, because I had done, this is before the current mayor was even mayor, when I had looked at the city in this issue, and I had, with one of, two of your predecessors, I looked at one of the issues that I had seen, the fact that people that get contracts with the city, many of the companies are not in this city. They're not from, some are not from New York State.
Right. Oh,
It
sure.
makes a difference when they're looking to get particularly MWBE companies. They're more likely local companies to be able to go in the highways and byways of a local city. And that's not just here. When I did work in Syracuse, when I did work in Buffalo, we found the same thing. But when you get companies that are from out of the area, even if they have an office here and have some staff that stays here for a while, it's not the same as having a local company that has a permanent relationship. They went to school with this one, they knew the family, knowing, you know, Bobo does roofing, and, you know, I know he's good. Let's help get his company up to snuff, and we're gonna do a teaming relationship. Forget the subcontracting. We're gonna go in arm. And so that made a difference. My company had an office in Syracuse. I got contracts with people who knew what I was doing in Syracuse and what I was doing with the nonprofits. That's what brought me into relationships with the for-profits. And I went in as a team member. I never went in as a sub with any of those contracts. And so, and even when I was in the wheelchair, they didn't say, that was a cripple now, she can't do stuff. They trusted me because they knew what I had already done, and I was on the ground. You don't get that from somebody from Texas. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, I just said Texas. You know, Alaska or something, I don't think you have anybody from Alaska. You see what I'm saying? I think that played a part. And when I looked back at the city of Albany, I thought that might be the case. I didn't ask anybody personally, but I also looked at the number of contracts that were given to people that were not from here, had not lived here, didn't have history here. So there are a number of reasons, and before you start solving a problem, look at what it might be. There's several reasons. And so I do know that that the city of Albany does accept that, but there are a lot of people that are not in there that do have companies that live and have their families right here. And so that's an issue, because there are more companies that are on that list. I was never on the city's list, and I was state certified with that particular company. And
Right.
so
I mean, we're definitely trying to get as many companies
I'm
certified as
not
possible.
questioning that. And
Yeah.
I've never questioned that particular issue. And what I'm saying, I believe you when you tell me your list doesn't contain enough to get the goals. I believe you when you say that.
Well, I mean, what I was saying is we accept New York State certification as well. So, I mean, it's not just our list, but,
I'm just saying,
yeah.
don't automatically say to solve the problem by changing the numbers if you haven't done triage on why the problem exists. That's all. That's all. I don't think it's as simple as the number's wrong. I think there's a little more multifaceted than that.
No, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I'm just talking about just I don't know, just the basic fact of just trying to enforce a goal that is, twice as big as the state goal. That will be an issue in terms of enforcement. I mean, like I said, needless to say, it's completely up to this committee, and if you want to, however you said it, I'm just going to try to enforce it as well as I can, and then I can report on it in the annual report and explain what the issues are. But I wanted to try to head it off at the pass a little bit, because it is a really different goal from any other place that I'm aware of. If we were to do the 30 and the 30, but it sounds like perhaps we're just revising it, revising the language.
Right, and the thing is, so essentially, doing 15 and 15. We're changing all the other parts and basically leaving it the same. We're just making the other updates is kind of what we're doing. You know, we're expanding but we're not working towards a higher goal, and again, I don't want,
Well, actually, we would be working, we would be doubling our current goal. We would be matching the state goal, but our current goal is 15%. So it would be doubling our current goal to 30%.
yeah.
And we can always work towards a higher goal. I mean, that should be, what we're always doing, but each step, each step has to be, I think, considered. And usually the thing that's considered is, demographic information.
Right, and I know it probably sounds like I'm trying to, get at and improve the MWB at the expense of the WB, which is that's not my goal, and that's not what I was trying to do, although it probably sounded like that.
No, not at all.
No,
I mean,
just said it.
definitely MBE has to be the focus, no doubt, yeah.
And Callie, I mean, it is entirely possible to build in, to change the numbers so that they are doubled for Albany and match New York State, but then to put in that as of, I don't know, in 10 years, or whatever the time period is, but to raise the percentage from 15% each to 20% each. And actually put something in the legislation where it's an expansion, it's doubling what we currently have matching New York State, but then actually after a set period of time. And I don't think it would be overly, I think that it's something that, I don't think it would be overly complicated to put that in to say, as of this specific date, all percentages in this bill will be, all percentages for MBE and WBE will be 20%, 20%.
Right.
Sure, that sounds great.
So unfortunately, we don't have our attorney here. He could make those adjustments for us here in the.
I think we can agree on the overall premise of the language, and because it's a local law, you're going to have to formally introduce the amendment at a meeting anyway and have it passed, correct?
No, it's an ordinance.
Oh, it's an ordinance. Well, you can do it that way, though.
Yeah.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I would propose, why couldn't we do 25 and 25? If we're going to do 20%, what would be the reason why we wouldn't consider 25% and 25%?
Because then it'd make it 50, right?
Yeah, I mean, that takes care of the contract issue, but, it's still just, it's quite a bit higher than any other goals in New York State or anywhere. And so, it may sound like that shouldn't be a consideration, but just as a person who's in the mix dealing with it every day, it just is, to me, it's a consideration to be in line with other, places, but it would take care of the contract issue.
And I just want to follow, when I'm listening, I'm thinking about the assessor that went on last year, and it could have been a step, to get to where they did it all at once, and so my mind just works like that. It makes me think about, in other areas where that logic wasn't applied or that consideration of, and so that's what I mean by still having it be ambitious to the point where it would send a message to those that don't participate to participate. And I think that the city benefits, I think everybody benefits with participation, because it makes it level, or it makes people feel like they're part of it. It's a lot of people that feel excluded. They don't go after the contracts because it doesn't seem like it's going to land in their direction. So,
Just to clarify, you feel like having a higher aspirational goal sends a message to the women and minority-owned businesses.
Yes, yes, and I, you know, the whole purpose is that, you know, groups were being left out of the contracts. You know, the reason why they have that in there, because for far so long, people weren't receiving consideration for it. And so I think it's still, we haven't gotten to the point where that's not the case, because they have found ways around it, you know. It's ways to satisfy the requirements, but it still doesn't go to the minorities that, you know, that this was intended for initially.
I mean, the biggest way that that happens is through the waiver process, which is really complicated. And, you know, a lot of documentation is required. You know, the prime contractor has to really show every area that's involved in the contract and how they tried to get women or minority participation for each area and the steps that they took, and then they have to submit a letter of explanation, and there's a lot to it. So that's the main thing that happens when the prime contractor isn't meeting the goals. And you know, there just would be a lot more waivers. You know, the higher the goal, the more waivers are getting processed by my office, which I just don't want my office to turn into a place that's all about processing waivers, because I feel like it sends the wrong message to the prime contractors. It's like if a prime contractor, you know, they win the award and then they just feel like, well, the goal is so high, I'm just going to do the waiver request. I'm not, you know, yeah.
But do you have to give them the if they're just saying, we don't want to bother, it's too complicated, I'm going to do the waiver, how about just not giving them the waiver?
You're saying like we would retract the contract at that point?
I mean, the idea is we put goals in place, we want to meet them, and they want to participate, they want to do business with the city of Albany, and so the thing is, if they can get around it by just saying it's not going to work for me and then filing a waiver, then I'd be filing waivers like crazy, trying to get around.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem because the thing is, you know, there's the procurement process, you know, the projects go out to bid, and sometimes there's not even that many bidders, you know, on our city projects. I mean, sometimes there's literally one or two, you know, so, I mean, quite often. And so, you know, we still need to do these, you know, public works projects. So, you know, and that's not really up to me. You know, I'm kind of like a small part, you know, in a way of these things. I mean, it would be hard to, you know, pull back, you know, a contract that's, you know, gearing up to do something like critical, you know, in the city, you know, because for this issue. Really, my role is to, you know, right, like make it difficult, you know, to not comply and to encourage, and I help them in every way to comply and provide, you know, the companies, the MWBE companies that they should contact, and I'm very much involved in that. But the higher the goal is, the more likely that there will be more and more contractors who, you know, are just ultimately filling out a waiver request. This might be too in the weeds, but I just don't think, I just don't think it encourages the right dynamic, kind of, in the whole interaction. You know, that's a concern that I have. I don't know.
Right, so I'd be fine with changing, and, you know, and trying to work the numbers, but again, like Deborah said, it's just 15 and 15, we're just picking numbers. Mr. Johnson offered the 25.
If I could, I think in terms of the rest of the legislation, we're all comfortable with that. So perhaps what we could do is look, because we do want to keep moving forward with this, and I think it's something that we're all on the same page that we would like to do at least, and we want, the expansion is, from my perspective, so important and huge. And so that part is well done through here. We're all set with that language, which is great. The percentage, I think that there's a desire to maybe come back and address that a little bit. So I think it is something that we could move this through the committee with the understanding that there would be amendments, and that once those amendments are made, we could look back at that, and if we're not comfortable, we can bring it back into the committee, and if we are, as members, we can continue forward. It'll be amended on the floor, and then that's what I would recommend.
And my only other suggestion to you, Councilmember Kimbrough, would be that we consider a compromise with starting at 30 to a gradual, let's say over the next 10 years, increase to Councilmember Johnson's compromise of the 50%. And I feel like that gets us into the sweet spot of getting everybody what they want. And we always have the opportunity to come back and evaluate sooner rather than later. I mean, if we put this into place and Andrea comes back and she's like, honestly, we did all these changes and now we're hitting 40%. Well, there's no reason why we wouldn't come back at that point and amend and increase the goal from there to a higher goal. We're not locked in by making a decision to go at the state level and monitoring how this plays out in reality. I do understand Ms. Richards' concerns about having a program that's really legitimate, and my concern would be if we set the goals so high that it becomes a program where everybody's asking for waivers. In that waiver process, they're now not required to do any MWBE participation at all. And so you may see a reverse trend by setting the goal too high of even less MWBE participation in any of our contract services, which is no one's intent in this. So, but that's, again, my opinion. This is your legislation, so.
I would just like, if we didn't always look at worst-case scenario. If we always looked at everything worst-case scenario, it's going to be hard to do anything that is new, that is needed. So when we get to this discussion of things that that have been one-sided for so long, it's always that discussion of, like it has to be perfect. It always goes negative on the stuff that I hear, the responses to it. And, I don't have a problem with starting off, but to wait 10 years, I think that, that's far too long to make adjustments. Like I said, it's a lot of thought put into this work, and we keep getting to this conversation and getting stuck. And I don't see anything wrong with aspiration when it comes to this, because what if it works? Sometimes when things change, that means that some groups are going to have to do more work, and it comes with the territory. I work as an educator in the daytime, and we get changes all the time. And I'm a homeschool coordinator, and they always say, the homeschool coordinator will do it, and we have to figure out how to do it. So I just hope that we can open up and understand that it doesn't always have to turn out negative when the right thing is done, when we're making something or attempting to make something whole that hasn't been right for a long time. So I just wish and hope that people can open up to see that it's potential for it to be a blessing to the city as well as the people in the city. So thank you.
And so we're talking setting it and then setting a graduated schedule that changes over what kind of time frame are we talking about? You mentioned 10 years, and again, I think, like Mr. Johnson said, that's kind of a long time, unless we're talking at the 5-year mark or,
That
you know,
was
at the
my
3-year
thought,
mark.
is that you would have graduated goals that get you from 30 to 50. So 3 years from now, it's 35%. 6 years from now, it's 40%. Do you understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And again, we have the opportunity to come back and address this if we're suddenly really meeting our goals, or we feel like despite those increase in goals, we're still not close and we want to claw back because we want to ensure that we maintain the integrity of the program. But I think that that is a fair compromise to say, hey, we're gonna go to the state level for now and continually increase that percentage over the course of 5 years, 10 years, however long you think is appropriate, till we get to Mr. Johnson's ideal of goal. I think that that's a fair compromise to offer.
All right, so maybe we'll start at the 30, we'll do the 15 and 15, and then we'll get with our staff and adjust and come up with a graduated schedule for the next few years to get us to where we need to be. But in terms of moving, I'd appreciate if we could move it out with the understanding that we're just gonna, everything else I think we all agree with. It's just those percentages, or that percentage, that would be the only thing that we would change or adjust beyond the committee, so.
And just to add to Councilwoman Keegan's point, I think if we kept it 4 years, you'll have the same 15 people with their eyes on it. But once you go out of 4 years, then the council never stays the same. And so now you will have different people that may have different visions. So when I'm thinking about this, in January starts a new council, that if they had the 4 years to watch this, it would be the same eyes and the same mindset on it. And I think that is, it makes a lot more sense than 5 years because, like I said, people sitting at the desk may change and they may feel different, and we may not be able to get the full capture of what we're looking for. So just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you again.
I think that's a really good point to kind of structure it that way, especially as we're beginning that phase. Councilmember Keegan, you had another?
No, I was just gonna say that's a fair point.
So why don't I make a motion, just because I think it's a little complicated and I have a vision in my head, and we'll see how it goes. So I move that we move ordinance 266123 out of the committee with a positive recommendation, with the expectation that we will be changing the percentages as noted in Article 4814, Section A, and throughout the document with an expectation of a phase-in. Those numbers we will look at as a committee. If we have any issues with that updated draft, any committee member is welcome to weigh in, and then we can bring it back into the committee. But with the understanding that we will be looking at those percentages and the specific way that those percentages are structured after the committee meeting.
Yes.
Makes sense. Great. Could I get a second on that smush? Seconded by Councilmember Keegan. All in favor? Aye.
It's basically quarter. It was quarter. Just before
Could I get a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.